Not to state the obvious or anything, but we are very much in the streaming era. Blockbuster is gone, RIP, physical media shelves are shrinking, and more folks are seemingly embracing digital. Everyone has their own streaming service now. And for us horror fans, we have the likes of Shudder and Screambox, which are dedicated solely to the genre. That said, and this is where I'm glad I'm such a big physical media guy, there's still a lot of stuff out there that's not available to stream, rent, or buy digitally. There are loads of horror films that fit this bracket that you won't be able to find online depending on where you live, so let's highlight a few of the best, shall we? I'm Ewan, this is What Culture Horror, and here are 7 great horror movies you can't stream anywhere. Number 7. Something Wicked This Way Comes. While 1983's Something Wicked This Way Comes has shown up sporadically on streaming services in the US and elsewhere over the years, at the time of recording, it's actually currently unavailable anywhere, save for French YouTube, according to Just Watch, but that's not exactly a wide release. Which is also kind of strange, given the film is a noted example of Disney's cool and edgy dark era, back when they were making interesting stuff like The Black Cauldron, where my Gurgi ride or dies at. So yeah, it should be on Disney Plus, right? Released in 1983 and starring Jonathan Pryce in a particularly infamous performance, Something Wicked This Way Comes was based on the Ray Bradbury novel of the same name and directed by Jack Clayton. Pryce plays Mr. Dark, the leader of a traveling carnival that sets up shop in a small Illinois town, which then leads to all sorts of sinister goings-on. Suitably atmospheric and a staple spook showing for kids everywhere, it's kind of wild that Clayton's film is so hard to find. In the UK, it basically doesn't exist. We haven't even gotten a physical release yet, let alone a streaming one. But the fact it's not even available in the US right now is even wilder. Definitely one more people need to check out, so if you're in the States or elsewhere, it might be worth picking up the 2021 American Blu-ray release, which also happens to be region-free. Number 6. The Ugly. Don't let the weird title fool you. 1997's The Ugly is one of horror's more obscure hidden gems. Scott Reynolds' straight-to-video cult classic depicts a psychiatrist treating serial killer Simon Cartwright. The doctor is attempting to establish whether Simon's murderous desires have been sated by a long incarceration in an asylum, which is really not up to snuff, but hey-ho, what could possibly go wrong? As she delves deeper into Cartwright's bloody past, Rebecca Hobbs' Dr. Shoemaker eventually discovers that her patient has a let's groan together at another poor mental health trope, violent alternate personality. It knew it was coming. This alter ego takes the form of a sinister voice in Simon's head, dictating all his murderous acts. Referred to only as the Ugly, this horrific identity also happens to possess psychic powers. So yeah, we get a bit of Stephen Kinginess thrown into the equation as well, as if the original premise wasn't wild enough already. But despite all the silly mental health tropes, and come on, a lot of our favorite movies have them, in blurring the lines between reality and Simon's twisted perceptions, The Ugly actually turns out to be a gripping watch. It's a legitimately frightening horror movie in many instances, utilizing creative direction and script writing along with some harrowingly violent kill sequences. The film's use of black blood is another inspired touch, making for a surreal and entertaining time at the movies. Again, though, not on any streaming service. Number 5. Grim Prairie Tales. A lesser-known horror anthology exploring the supernatural in the Wild West, Grim Prairie Tales superbly weaves the distinctly dissonant genres of traditional westerns and horror together. Led by none other than Darth Vader and Chucky themselves, that would be James Earl Jones and Brad Dourif respectively, Grim Prairie Tales is one of those I will fly the flag for as an anthology movie appreciator. We need more of those. The film's premise and characters seem extremely limited on the surface, but the increasingly outlandish tales and corny performances carry it through. Wayne Coe's picture carves out a niche for itself as a sort of western take on the Twilight Zone. It's not the scariest horror film out there, let alone the scariest western horror, thank you for the Nightmares Bone Tomahawk bisection scene, but what it lacks in sheer poop your pants scary factor, the movie more than makes up for with how watchable it is. And despite the lofty accolades of the leading duo, Grim Prairie Tales is yet another name that one will have to look beyond the confines of regular streaming services to actually experience. Number 4. Lover's Lane. Also known as I'm Still Waiting for You, 1999's Lover's Lane is a gory love letter to the heyday of the slasher film. Lover's Lane's primary antagonist is based on the prevalent urban legend of the Hook, a faceless killer with a Captain Hook-esque implement for a hand. John Stephen Moore's direct-to-video offering follows the usual group of silly teenagers who were terrorized by an escaped mental patient haunting the titular location in search of fresh blood. It's no I Know What You Did Last Summer, but if you're down for some delicious late 90s horror vibes, you could do a lot worse. What are you waiting for? Featuring a young Anna Faris in her feature film debut, Lover's Lane exhibits just about every trope that you could possibly associate with a slasher, but it's just best to let the cliched silliness wash over. And yeah, like the other examples on this list, Lover's Lane doesn't currently appear on any streaming services as of 2023. While that's a bit of a bummer, if you're interested, the always great Arrow Films put out a new Blu-ray of the film earlier this year, so if you want to, you should go treat yourself. Number 3. Apartment Zero. Apartment Zero may be more of a psychological thriller than a full-blown horror film, but it just about has enough horror to warrant an entry on this list. The notoriety of the film's homoerotic overtones, its diffusion of black comedy, and an outrageously over-the-top performance from a young Colin Firth land Martin Donovan's 1988 outing a spot here. Set during a, shall we say, socially tumultuous period in 1980s Argentina, Apartment Zero follows a friendship between two expatriates that turns sour when one begins to suspect the other of committing a series of politically motivated murders, which is just average friendship drama. Despite praise for the aforementioned Firth and Hart Bochner in the leading roles, the film was panned by the majority of reviewers upon release. Despite this, Apartment Zero has received more positive assessments from critics in recent years, leading to it gaining something of a cult status. Good luck finding it on streaming though. When you consider Firth's profile as one of the more recognizable and celebrated faces throughout Hollywood to this day, it's almost unbelievable that one of his earliest hits still can't be found online. Making all of that worse too is the fact that the only physical release we've gotten is a DVD from 1999. Someone needs to give this one the HD treatment. Number 2. The Entity. When your movie gets the Martin Scorsese touch of approval, you know it's wild it's not available online. The Entity, directed by Sidney J. Furie, depicts the tribulations of the unfortunate Carla Moran. A single mother residing in Los Angeles, Carla is sexually assaulted and tormented within her own home by an invisible malevolent force, the film's eponymous Entity. Now, despite the contentious nature of its premise, its endorsement from Marty has ensured continued interest in the Entity over the years, with the Raging Bull and Goodfellas director once arguing that it surpassed the likes of Psycho and The Shining in terms of fright factor. I'm kind of personally doubtful it's that good, but even so, it's the kind of praise that makes you want to check it out. Sadly, The Entity isn't available to stream either in the US or UK, while both the 2017 and 2019 US Blu-ray releases are out of print, meaning you can expect to pay a hefty price for both of them. One of those where not only would an appearance on streaming services be much appreciated, but also a wider physical release too, maybe even on 4K? And number 1, The Uninvited. The 1940s saw a wave of really good supernatural-themed horror films at cinema screens. At the top of the pack for me personally is obligatory Ewan recommendation Dead of Night, an Ealing Studios chiller that remains one of the creepiest things I've ever watched. But you know what else gets a solid recommendation too? The Uninvited, which released in 1944. Lewis Allen's picture follows a pair of siblings who purchase a property in the mystical English county of Cornwall that soon becomes plagued by paranormal activity. Far from being just a fantastic film, The Uninvited is another British film from the decade to be legitimately scary, a true masterclass in suspense and fear. In addition to receiving an Academy Award nomination for Best Cinematography, The Uninvited was a commercial hit at the time. Allen's horror even managed to outgross contemporary Universal Studios powerhouses like House of Frankenstein, adding to its already fairly glowing reputation. The fact that such a seminal piece of horror cinema can't even be found on one of the dedicated horror streaming services today is totally naff. For those whose interests have been piqued though, there is a gorgeous Criterion Blu-ray of the film that you can pick up from the BFI shop if you're in the UK, and on the Criterion store itself if you're over in the US. Definitely check it out.